Hello dear friends, let's talk about problems of Opel Astra G. The Opel Astra G's start was 1.2 16V with 75 horsepower and 110 Nm at 4000 RPM. The cavalry of the engine satisfies, but the extremely lean torque resulting from the low volume makes the overtaking very tedious and yet not recommended. Opel Astra G 1.4 16V, the engine has 90 horsepower and 125 Nm at 4000 RPM. This engine should be avoided, as Opel has only kept it on offer for some time. It was thrown out very quickly and appeared in the new Astra model 1.4 16V, but which was derived from the 1.2 16V engine. There have been complaints of burnout of the cylinder head gasket, but the real reason for pulling that engine is unknown. The top speed of this model was 182 km/h, but with a lot of trouble, a tribute to the smaller volume. Opel Astra G 1.6i with 2 valves per cylinder and 65 and 85 bhp with 125/138 Nm of torque at 2400/2600 RPM make this engine an extremely interesting combination for people looking for good old engine robustness. A very important fact is that this is the only gasoline that is not sensitive to belt cracking because the valves are too far away from the pistons. The average consumption of this engine is about 6.5 to 7 liters, and practice shows that it is even more economical than 1.2 16V and 1.4 16V engines, and with that it achieves a very solid 180 km/h. Opel Astra G 1.6 16V with 101 bhp and 150 Nm at 3600 RPM, and 1.8 16V with 115 bhp and 170 Nm /3600 RPM, and 125 bhp and 170 Nm /3800 RPM are standard from a Vectra B, and 1.6 16V is especially recommended and very good fuel consumption of 7 liters on average, but also a decent speed of 188 km/h, while 1.8 liters with 115 and 125 horsepower on average already consume 8 liters. While the final speed is 195/205 km/h. For those who like faster driving, Opel Astra G 2.0 16V, the engine is the ideal solution. There is a regular version and a sport version with shorter transmissions in the transmission. Both versions have 136 horsepower and 188 Nm at 3400 RPM. The sport version takes 9 seconds to 100 km/h for shorter transmissions, while the regular one takes about 9.5 seconds. The top speed for the sport version is 208 km/h, while for the regular one it is 210 km/h due to the longer ratio. Most interestingly, the average consumption is at the level of 1.8 engines, with the sport versions consuming about 0.2 and 0.5 liters more than usual. That engine replaced the 2000 2.2 with 147 horsepower. This timing chain driven engine is not the happiest solution, despite its power and very decent acceleration of 8.8 seconds and a top speed of 214 km/h. However, average consumption can easily jump up to 10 liters per 100 kilometers. The 2.0 16V OPS version has 166 bhp and 188 Nm at 4600 rpm. This is a redesign of the ordinary 2.0 HP 136V engine and is only produced in 5,000 units. It should be avoided due to redesigned suspension and engine management, which is extremely expensive if a failure occurs. Although there have never been complaints about electronics. If you want a sports car at a discounted price, then the Astra Coupe 2.0 Turbo is the best solution. The engine is a classic 2.0 16V, but with the addition of the turbocharger. Saab was a huge help in the construction of this model, which is a guarantee of the quality of the turbocharger. The engine develops 192 horsepower and 250 Nm at 1950 rpm. The acceleration is 7.5 seconds to 100 km per hour, while the cruising speed is near 250 km per hour. The average consumption reported by the factory is 8 and 9 liters, and it is particularly about 11 liters. And it is practically around 11 liters. Opel Astra G gasoline engines are great, requiring only a regular gear belt replacement, preferably at 60,000 kilometers. The most reliable ones are the more powerful ones with 16, 1.8 and 2.0 liter valves, but they are also quite thirsty. Some medium-sized solutions are 1.6 liter units, either older with 8 or more modern with 16 valves and 100 HP. The smallest 1.2 liter engine and 16 valves perform much better in a smaller corset, and it's not too often on offer here. Also worth mentioning is the exceptional twin-port unit 1.4 with 16 valves and 90 horsepower. The 1.4 16V doesn't really have enough power for some faster driving, but with a little patience you can travel to the sea without much strain. The downside of the Opel Astra G is certainly the older diesel engines. Quite simply, these engines are not at the level of those in Volkswagen, primarily in terms of power, speed and low power consumption. At the start of production, the 1.7-liter TD engine was installed in the Opel Astra G, which is too weak for this body and not at all quiet. The better choice is a Vector-known 2.0 Di with direct fuel injection in the cylinders and 16 valves, featuring equally noisy operation. Later, a more economical and somewhat quieter 1.7 DTI 75 horsepower engine is coming, and they are powerful enough. 2.0 and 2.2 DTI with 100 and 125 horsepower, which have only come close to the modern HDI and TDI aggregates. However, if you want the Astra's second diesel engine at all costs, then the new 1.7C DTI common rail is the right choice. It is important to emphasize that the older versions of the 1.7 diesel engine, although not more powerful, are characterized by above average durability. Starting with diesel, and the Opel Astra G came with a 2.0 Di, 82 horsepower and 185 Nm at 2000 rpm. This is a very interesting engine because it is driven by a timing chain and requires virtually no maintenance other than oil change. It is extremely fragile, with an average consumption of around 5 liters. The acceleration is about 14 seconds, while the cruising speed is 175 km per hour. However, due to the lack of intercooler, this model is not quite as lively as the 100 horsepower DTI with 230 Nm at 1950 RPM. Acceleration to 100 km per hour is 12 seconds, while speeding is a very good 188 km per hour. The average consumption is about 6 liters. Also, it is driven by a timing chain as well as the engine 2.2 DTI, which has only been installed in Astra since 2001. Like the Vectra, it has 125 HP and a very good 280 Nm at just 1500 RPM. Acceleration to 100 km per hour is 9 and 9 seconds, while speeding is very good, 205 km per hour. The average consumption is about 6 and 5 liters, but despite the highest consumption of all the diesels on offer in this Astra, this engine is the most ideal solution because for its power, despite its classic direct injection and larger volume than typical of the compact class, it has reported at least failures, and 6.5 liters per 100 kilometers doesn't sound like much. Opel Astra G 1.7 DTI with 75 bhp and 165 lb-ft at 1800 rpm, it emerged in 2000, making it an interesting choice for demanding customers. The acceleration to 100 km per hour is 14.5 seconds, while the top speed is 170 km per hour. However, this engine is powered by a timing belt, so maintenance is more demanding and more expensive than the 2.0 Di. The average consumption is about 5 liters. There was also 1.7 DTI Eco 4 with 65 horsepower and 165 Nm at 1800 RPM. Exactly how many of these models were sold is unknown, but Opel Astra G consumed an average of about 4 liters per factory data due to its specially engineered car floor, improved aerodynamics, and special Continental tires. Also, less power was contributed by a different gearbox with extremely long 4 and 5 speed transmissions. Its fourth gear and car is practically unusable below 70 km per hour and in fifth under 90 km per hour. The tooth belt increases its maintenance cost as well as the special tire dimensions. 175 on 80 R14. The suspension of the Opel Astra G is very well solved, i.e. a very good compromise was found between comfortable driving, far more comfortable than Volkswagen competitors, and yet good enough to withstand the rather demanding engaged driving with minimal tilting as a result of Opel's cooperation with Lotus, making the final suspension adjustment on the Astra G. Tires dimension 195 R15 low with a well-tuned ABS system, very safe stopping and no jerks, which adds to the comfortable feel of the Opel Astra G. The transmission is quite correct. The body of the Opel Astra G has exceptional torsional strength for the class, even when it was introduced and canned and fully galvanized. The Rust warranty was 10 years, and this badge reflects the confidence that Opel had in this model. The Opel Astra G is a very heavy car, over 1,100 kilograms base model, and is a credit for the very good team. It all carries the classic double wishbone front suspension and standard conservative semi-rigid axle rear. Opel did a fantastic job there. The Astra lies on the road very safely, but the first guide to the construction of this suspension was durability. The fact is very important for our customers. The Astra has more durable suspension than the Volkswagen Golf 4th and models built on its platform. Golf is certainly better in handling, but in terms of maintenance and durability, the Astra is a compact car, especially because the suspension is very simple, and our mechanics have no problem repairing it. The only problem can be with frontal stabilizers. It is the pain of all the 90s and occurs with a creak and slight tapping. The brakes of the Opel Astra G are very durable and do their job well. Only models with 1.2 16V and 1.6i engines come with drums on the rear axle. Other models come with all 4 discs. 256 to 266 millimeters on the front axle, ventilated 275 millimeters on the rear axle full, while the 2.0 16V Sport, 2.0 16V OPS and 2.2 16V, 2.2 16V Turbo and 2.2 DTI, they come with front discs taken from the Vectra B 2.0 16V onwards and a model from 1999, measuring 288 multiplied 25 millimeters, which stopped the Astra very brutally. Admittedly, some owners of the Opel Astra G complain about the occasional crunching of the instrument panel after 100 kilometers, but some are in the minority. However, some hurts, like unstable electronics, and problems with the transverse shoulders and front axle bearings, unfortunately, continue to be repeated in the Astra G. Another thing to keep in mind with the Opel Astra G is the functioning of all the electrical devices in the car, because according to Opel, of every third failure on the Opel Astra was of this type. Steering rack and the computer also know that they are causing problems, so when it comes to crashes, they know a lot of money to get the owner out of their pocket. Fortunately, they are not so common. Diesel engines are susceptible to severe breakdowns if you do not use the prescribed Euro diesel. So make sure you acquire well before pouring anything into your tank, as the consequences are very expensive. Opel Astra G petrol and diesel engines failures are very rare, reducing diesel to malfunction of the airflow meter, not as common as Volkswagen TDI engines, and a very expensive repair of all petrol 16V engines as well as 1.7 DTI diesel engines in the case of the tooth belt. Otherwise, the timing belt must be changed every 60,000 kilometers as with both spanners. However, if a timing belt purchased from an auto parts store is fitted, replacement is recommended every 30,000 kilometers. With us, the popular 1.7 DTI engines is of Japanese manufacturer and is supplied by Isuzu. It is not the most reliable and cannot be compared to the higher quality Opel gasoline or the TDI JTD or DCI turbo diesel manufactured by Volkswagen, Fiat and Renault. There are also problems with high pressure pump electronics, which can be conveniently repaired by repairing high pressure pump electronics. Diesel also has problems with airflow meter and turbine failure. Diesel 2.0 increased oil consumption. The greasy, oily water bottle of the 1.7 DTI engine can be solved by replacing the erasers in the head between the head and the nozzle housing. Alternator failure in diesel. If the alternator does not charge, the lamp on the instrument panel lights up, causing the power steering to have no power. Difficulty steering because the electric power steering pump is powered directly from the alternator as a large consumer. The fogging of the windows inside the vehicle windows when the heating is switched on may be remedied by replacing the pollen filter and the cabin filter. Grinding of front bearings, i.e. hubs, replacement of front bearings is more expensive as the bearings change along with the ABS sensor.
Don't forget to subscribe my channel, and if you're the owner of this car, then share your experience. It will help others to choose a car. Goodbye.